to be. Is the boat moving?
Yeah.
It's the first person you call in the morning because you can't wait to hear their voice. And you call them to dance and to eat and to drink and to love and to steal a kiss or maybe just go on a road trip. It's true love. And when things are bad, they're the first person you call because they can help you, they can hurt you, and they help you grow. They complete you. And as I sat down to write this toast this afternoon, I realized that, oddly, Pete Wingard is one of my great loves. Road trip? And I can honestly say I wouldn't be half the man I am today if it wasn't for Pete Wingard. Peter and I have known each other for 35 years. We met in high school, and Pete was this really tall, skinny, nerdish guy, and I'm happy to say he's still quite tall and quite nerdish. Pete was also a little bit special. He was very bookish and also kind of a rebel. And I would encourage everybody to ask him about the time he almost blew up our high school.
That was before blowing up high school.
And I was, of course, quite different. I was drop-dead gorgeous, super arrogant, cocky, pretentious, self-effacing, self-blowing up, and kind of a blowhard. So Pete and I didn't really get along at first. You know, sometimes a great love takes a while to marinate to really, come to fruition. And so Pete and I had our differences. It was not love at first sight. And our real courtship followed when several years later in college, we went to the University of Colorado, we ran into each other, and we discovered that we both had done exchange programs in France. And so we got together about every 3 months. We'd buy a bottle of Calvados, 2 packs of Gauloise Blonde, and we would get hammered and talk about philosophy. By philosophy, of course, I mean les filles françaises. And, things were going along. It was kind of, it wasn't getting too serious. And we graduated, and Pete went ahead and he moved to Paris. And we lost touch a little bit. It was, kind of like a when Harry met Sally moment. And so you had to fast forward a few years. And then it was a few years later, and I graduated, and Pete was living in Paris at this stage, and he came back, and I was doing terribly. I had recently been fired, my girlfriend had dumped me, I was broke, and I was going to move into my parents' basement. And Pete was on Christmas break from France, and he was like, dude, Paris! You gotta come here. You can be broke in Paris. You can be homeless in Paris. You can have no girlfriends in Paris. You can get a job in Paris. It's fantastic. You can practice with me until you get on your feet. I was like, well, this is a tough deal to pass up. So I came. And it was in Paris when the affair truly got hot. Now, if this were a movie, we would cut to like a scene, like a rapidly cut scene set to like Nick Tamel and smoking cigarettes and drinking wine, doing tequila shots, smoking doobies, and arguing about philosophy and, let's face it, picking up nanas. Basically, we lived the debauched life of a bunch of young expats. And at the time, we both had girlfriends, and I'm not going to talk about them because really, they were not part of our love story. But unfortunately, eventually I ran out of money, and so I had to go back to the States, and Pete stayed here. And we visit each other from time to time in Boulder, and then in New York City, and then in Ann Arbor, but as Pete mentioned, he got married and had a couple kids, and we kind of slowly drifted apart. And then in fact, one time we had a really vicious argument, and I don't really know what it was about, but I suspect that, when you're the love of your life marries another woman, it's easy to do. About 10 years ago, as Pete mentioned, at the same time as he was going through his divorce, I was going through a really difficult time. And I called Pete and we reconnected, and it was like nothing had ever happened. And I honestly don't remember what the problem was. And he was just, our love just became rekindled, and it was just, it's like we'd never been apart. And Peter, as our love became more intense, he never tried to make me an honest man, thank you. He never vowed to me or asked me to vow to him through richer or poorer, through better or worse. But as I became, as most of you know, gravely ill, and as I went towards my my journey from illness into death, whenever I needed Pete, I would call Pete, and and within 48 hours, Pete would jump on a plane and come here to give me emotional support or to help me through a physical time. And I'll always be eternally grateful for that. But during this time, Pete started talking about a new woman. And every time he came, it got more and more. He just rubbed my face in it. And eventually I met this so-called Susan. And immediately my affair with Pete was over. A new affair had begun, and it was a three-way. But that didn't last very long because Pete and Susan's love was so great that I couldn't contain it. We couldn't contain it. And Pete encouraged me, and Susan encouraged Pete, because I hadn't met Susan yet, to begin the fête de mics and all of that stuff. And so not only is it this auspicious occasion, but most of us in this room would not be here if it was not for these two people. We owe you a lot. Not only have the two of you taught me, and I presume to speak for many of the room, you've taught us what true love looks like, what commitment means, what friendship and what family means.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Throughout the 35 years I've known Pete, most of that time he and I were searching for something. We were, part of the .com go-go days, and we were always looking for that thing in the future that's going to make us happy. That thing that would all make it seem worthwhile. And that thing was always sometime in the future. Happiness was for tomorrow. And in the last few years, Pete has found his happiness today. And Pete now, when I talk to him, is no longer talking about some imaginary future. He's talking about the moment that he has. Now, I think I can speak for all of us. While I'm still pretty irritated that you stole Peter from me, I've come to realize that you didn't take Peter from us. You helped to create an international family. And it's one that's founded on love and grace and beauty. And the two of you are shining beacons in that family. And the only words I think can adequately express, because there are no words that can express it, but the best I have is and I speak for everybody, we love you so, so very much.
Yes.